Hi, it's Frederick from Family Quilt, and we welcome to our new live. This is, I think, the fourth one actually. So hopefully you're still around. Actually, hopefully more people are around and kind of interested to hear what we have to say. So this week we're going to talk about where to get started when you're trying to collect your family memories, and we're going to talk about what makes a story a great story. So let's just jump in. Last week, I think we talked about the fact that everybody has a story to tell, or has stories to tell, and that's really important. This is nothing to do with age. You don't need to be an old person to have lots and lots and lots of things to tell. Actually, for most people, we have all lived. We've all been born. We've all grown up. We've all gone to school. We've all had friends. We've all had heartaches. We've all had happy moments, and so there are for everybody something, some stories that we can tell. Now, one of the questions is kind of what makes a good story? Well, actually, I think at Family Quilt Jenny, we think a good story is a real story. I think that when you go these days and you're into, hi Caroline, and you're into the world of Facebook, it's a bit dodgy actually thinking about we are currently talking on Facebook, but hey ho. When you're in the world of Facebook, there's been a lot of criticism about how you end up kind of portraying this kind of absolutely perfect life. And actually somebody recently was telling me that they've kind of could see their friend's life go on and what was happening, and it all seemed wonderful, happy family, happy children, lovely holiday. And eventually this person bumps into her friend, one day in town and said, how's life? Looks like you're having a wonderful time. And the friend actually says, oh, I'm getting divorced. And you're like, really? How is that possible? I mean, here you are and you kind of seem to have a wonderful life, and that wasn't really the reality. And so I think that, when it comes to kind of stories and it comes to, Family Quilt, if you choose to subscribe, I mean, what we would really encourage you is to tell the stories the way they are, because no life is only made of happy moments. They are the happy moments and they are the sad moments. They are the moments when you're proud of your children, and they are the moment where you're embarrassed about somebody in your family, or even sometimes your children, and so actually the important thing is to be real, because if you are going to collect some of your life stories, this is for you, this is for your family, this is for your children, your grandchildren, maybe your parents actually, and it's important, I think, that this is true, and that's why you should be therefore you should kind of tell the stories the way they are. And yes, sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's sad, sometimes you're proud, sometimes you're embarrassed, sometimes it's good times, and sometimes it's bad time. But actually, in the end, that's just the way life is. So, with that in mind, around kind of telling the stories, the way they really are, the ups and the downs of life, let's kind of have a think about, how you get started. We get asked quite often that, people say, okay, well, yeah, maybe telling stories, but what kind of stories? I haven't got loads and loads of things to say, and you're like, okay, so how do we get started, right? Well, we're in November. So the first thing to get started maybe is to look at what has happened this year. What has happened this year that, is worth remembering, that you may want to kind of in a few years' time kind of remember about. So take the calendar out, take your phone and start scrolling. Where did you go this year? What kind of holiday did you take? What kind of school celebration, fete or events did you attend? What happened with your parents? Did you have big family get together? Did you have a weekend away with some friends? Did you have a fabulous dinner party? What is it that actually has happened this year that is worth that is worth writing about? I mean, for us, actually, every year we do a book at the end of the year. This year we're going to do a storybook, but we have done before books, and so we do actually take the time to reminisce a little bit about what has happened. Hi, Martin. We do take a little bit of time to reminisce about what has happened in this, in the last year, and that's always a great way to start, because in a way, those memories are very fresh. Things have just happened. It's last month's dinner party with your friends where you had the most amazing time, and always this walk in the park you took with your kids, a couple of weeks ago, where, I mean, we used actually to take walk in the park, and we had the troll parks and the troll woods and that kind of stuff. And, it's that kind of stuff that is really easy, I think, to get started with. there is no story that is a little story. Really, it comes down to what are those little moments that you think, you know what, one day I will want to remember. We in our family have a test, we call it the rocking chair test, and we think about it as, when we are 75, 80 years old and we're rocking, on the veranda one day in our chair, and we look back at our life, what kind of things do we want to be still remembering, and what do we want to be, have a little bit of happiness in our hearts, or a little bit of sadness in our heart for those moments that were, little precious moments. So don't look back at this year and think, oh, well, nothing important happened. It isn't about what important happened. I mean, it could be what important happened, but a lot of it is actually just what happened. And is it something that you can, you could be, writing a little story about. The second thing is to look back at old photos. Now, if you're going to look at this year, you might just look at what's in your phone, but it might be worth starting with older photos. Certainly, I mean, that is a way I started with my parents. We got, out, they have this trunk, and in this trunk there was loads and loads and loads of photos, and that's how we did. We went back in and we started looking at photos and said, okay, well, what was that? What happened? What was that? Who was in the photo actually? Tell me the story behind that particular event. And I've done that myself. I've gone back. I've got a whole lot of photos in our photo books because we've been doing them for the past 10 years. We've got photos on our phones, which we've had for a long time, on our computer, actually more like it. We have really old photos that are just in kind of packets, like the old way, and that are in a trunk we have upstairs. And then actually more recently, my father got a whole lot of slides converted to photos. So we've also got those, to browse through. And I think that what is interesting is when you're going to go and you're going to browse through some of those that are, a couple of years old or maybe 40 years, kind of ago, there will be some emotions that will come. And I think I would say follow your heart. If you feel suddenly you see a photo and you think, wow, actually that is a lovely... I remember that it's a lovely memory, then you will have a story. I know recently for me, because my father got those slides, there's a picture taken at my birthday, and I'm not sure, I must be 10, 11 maybe, and my grandparents are there, and actually seeing pictures of my grandparents was really quite emotional, and it really brought back to me all of those memories. I mean, I used to in France, you don't go to school on a Wednesday. So I used to go every Tuesday night to my grandparents, stay with them on a Wednesday. And then my father would come and pick me up on a Wednesday night. And then my sister came along, and my sister came as well. And my grandmother and I used to have the biggest Monopoly kind of competition you could ever think about. Week in, week out, we would play on a Wednesday afternoon. We would keep a tab of what was going on. My grandfather would sit in a chair, and he would, every time my father would arrive to pick me up, he would say, "Oh God, my wife's got bankrupt again today," and just actually seeing those pictures of my grandparents sitting at my birthday, at the dinner table, really brought all of those lovely stories back into my mind, and it was lovely actually to kind of write a few things, about them, and then attach, some of those photos that came with it. So when you do look at some of those photos that are in your trunk or in your old photo books or in your computer and I've been there for a long time, just follow your heart. Your heart, you will know the memories that are the ones that you really, kind of want to talk about. Now, a third way to get started is to think about the big milestones in your life. They are big events that happen, and it's when you leave home, it's when you get married, it's when you have a baby, is when maybe you leave school or you move, on another side of the world or another side of the country, and you lose your friends, or a big birthday, or a funeral, because you lost somebody that was very dear to you, a friend, or somebody from the family. So there are some really important dates in your life, and I think that if you kind of sit there and with a cup of coffee, tea, or a glass of wine, whatever it is you fancy, or beer for some, sitting there and kind of going back through what has happened in the years of your life, and think, actually, what were those big kind of events, what were those kind of pivotal, kind of moments. And for us, really, I think when, I know when I'm kind of going that way, I remember my wedding day, obviously, because I think it's kind of one of those days that is in your mind forever. And actually, the thing with wedding day that's quite cool as well is you can ask your friends and kind of think, well, what do you remember? Because I mean, what they might remember is not exactly what you remember, which is always a good way of kind of making a story. So I think this is what happened, and actually, no, my friend said, this is other things that happened. But certainly, that's a lovely, kind of lovely one. And the other one for us, probably that in terms of a big milestone, is when we left England and we moved to Sydney. With our children. Oh, hi, Annick. This is my friends from France. Hello, hello. And that was a huge milestone in our life. The boys were 12 and 10, and we decided to go, and that was really quite emotional to go. And I remember leaving our house and kind of thinking, gosh, that's it. We're going to sell the house, and and we're going to be going. So big milestones are, kind of really big one for you. Another option is to look at old documents. I mean, I don't know, maybe, you're of a generation where you wrote letters or you received letters. It might be an old boyfriend. It might be your parents because you were away on holiday. I mean, there are lots of documents, or it might be, an old school reports that suddenly you fancy, getting out and reading back. There are lots of old documents that, can also sparks, your memory and make you feel, there is a story to tell, something that you want to remember, something that, you want to share. Now, if all fails, the other way is just start with the beginning. I was born on whatever, I was born in this place, and this is where I lived for so many years. And, my parents were like this and my grandparents were like that. I mean, they are obviously kind of other ways you can start, and the beginning is never a kind of a bad way. I think sometimes when you think about the beginning, it feels a little bit boring and you're not quite sure about the stories, but again, it's all it is about is trying to get yourself started, and it can be quite intimidating, to get going with writing stories, but actually once you get going, you realize that there are so many things in your life that have happened that are big things or little things. Again, always said at the beginning, happy things or sad things, but actually are worth remembering, because, one day when you're 75 or 80 years old and you're on your rocking chair test and you're looking back of your life, you will actually thoroughly enjoy reading back, or hearing back your recording of having done that. Now, on Family Quilt, we have actually compiled over 150 questions to help you get going. And if you otherwise, you can look. There's also a lot of help on the website, on the web, about where you might get going with some very specific questions. I mean, we have put questions in kind of 7 categories, from kind of your ancestors to your own growing up to your family, and to your travels that you may have had, the first time, the best favorite memories that you may have. So hopefully we've kind of got enough there to kind of get you going. Now, in the end, though, what I would say, it is about getting started. There is no right, there is no wrong. There is no, wrong story. There is no right story. There is no right order. There is no wrong order. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is getting those stories out that, you will want to remember and you will want to pass on one day, maybe to your children or your grandchildren. And so just get going, whichever way it is, whether it's because you're looking back at just what has happened in the last, 11 months of the year, or because you're looking back at old photos, at things that you feel really quite emotional about, or, you're looking at old documents, or, you're looking at your big milestone, or you start from the beginning. It doesn't matter. Just get going. That is the single most important thing. Try to kind of document things the way they are, because a real, a good life is a real life. In the end, that's what it is about. There is no point trying to pretend you've had the most amazing life. Some of the times it's been harder. And actually, on this note, my mother-in-law was kind of collecting quite a few stories of her life. We were using her as a guinea pig, and it was lovely because one day she came and she said, my life hasn't always been wonderful. I've had some tough moments, and I think I should write about those as well. And I thought this was lovely because, yes, we wanted to hear as well that some of her life had been tough, and I think it was really important for her as well, to set the record. The record straight about what had happened. So no right, no wrong, no right story, no wrong story, no right order, no wrong order. Just get going. And hopefully today we've given you a few tips to make it a little bit easier for you to know where to get started. So until next week, have a lovely evening. Bye.